Hello, darling. I'm Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, and you're watching The Horror Show.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to The Horror Show. I'm Cecil Laird.
I'm Susie Von Slaughter.
And we are here to review the comic book series Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. That's right, Susie's here for a comic review. That's, I think, the first one ever.
Fuck you, man.
Well, here's the thing. The reason is, I knew Susie would like this. Well, at least I had an idea. I told her she had to do it with me before I had actually read it, but
Right.
I knew that the subject matter is one of her favorite things.
Duh.
So yeah, we are going to talk about the first four issues of what I believe is intended to be an ongoing Elvira series. That just so we give proper credit up top where credit is due, this series was written by David Avallone, and then the artist is Dave Acosta, the colorist is Andrew Kovalt, and the letterer is Taylor Esposito, and the editor is Kevin Kettner. So there were a ton of covers, which Elvira tells us many times
Yes.
throughout the book. But yeah, we're going to go ahead and go through this and talk a little bit about the story. We'll talk about the artwork. We'll talk about the characterization, of course, because Elvira is a pivotal horror icon. But we'll start off with our overall thoughts. So, Susie, ladies first, what did you think of this?
For someone who really doesn't read comic books, obviously when Cecil told me about it, I was like, yes, I'm all about this. And yes, of course, because it seemed like something that I could hear her speaking.
Mm-hmm.
It was like she was there. They really captured it perfectly. And again, for someone who doesn't read comic books, I loved it. I read it. I was engaged the whole time, and it was amazing. I loved it. Good experience. Good time.
For sure. So I'll chime in with my opinion. I wasn't sure what I was going to think of this.
How dare you?
I read the first issue when it came out about 4 months ago, or maybe 5 at this point, because I think the last issue came out towards the end of last year, at the very beginning of this year. But when I read it, I was like, okay, this is cheesy, campy, like, I don't know if I'm going to get into this. Yeah. But when I sat down and read all 4 in a row, I was like, this is actually pretty brilliant. I even said that, wrote it down to myself. I was like, this writing is actually pretty brilliant. Because he does things that the writer, David Avallone, does things that in other comics would stick out like a sore thumb. It just wouldn't work. Like, I know you haven't read many comics, but trust me.
No, there are things in that I can already tell that
There's a lot of fourth wall breaking by Elvira herself. And there's a lot of sexual innuendos by Elvira herself.
Yes.
And I was like, I don't know. After just reading the 1 issue, at first I was like, I don't know if that's going to work. After the 4 issues, I was like, it occurred to me. My only real experience with Elvira is the late 80s Elvira, Mistress of the Dark movie.
Yes!
Which is, I like it a lot. I really enjoy it. I love the character. I did see a few of her late night movie, hostings, as it were. So I know that she is a very hypersexualized, obviously with what she's wearing. She's hypersexualized. She's also hypersexual and just the innuendo queen. And then
she is my spirit animal.
But yeah, overall, it was just a really entertaining read. Much more entertaining than I thought it was going to be, quite frankly. And that's not to disparage on the writer. I didn't know the writer before reading this series. So I just was like, oh, Elvira comic book, how good can that be? Turns out pretty damn good.
Yeah.
Turns out pretty damn good. So we'll talk about the story, and then we'll talk about the artwork. So the story starts off in the first issue. And Elvira is working on the set of a B-grade horror movie, a vampire, a Dracula movie, as it were. And you can see right off that the artwork by Dave Acosta is very appropriate for Elvira. I mean, it's very generous as far as drawing her ample assets. I'm sorry, Susie, is there something wrong?
I'm all about this. No, I'm going back and forth because I'm all about this. I wasn't even trying to
But it gets pretty crazy pretty quickly. So she goes back to her trailer, which I think is funny because it's an actual trailer park trailer. And she goes back there, and there's this coffin, which is apparently a magical coffin, and she gets sucked into this portal with a definitely not a gratuitous crotch shot as she flies through the portal, and she emerges back in, I was not ancient times, but back in, I don't know, the 1700s?
Yeah.
Is it? And where she runs across Mary Shelley and two poets that are with her. Well, it's Mary, whatever her name is. Hang on, she calls her something else because she's not Mary Shelley yet. She's with the poet Shelley, who she eventually marries and becomes Mary Shelley. But anyway, she runs across Mary Shelley, who of course does eventually write Frankenstein, and then Elvira just has this little adventure where they're investigating this dark castle, and there's this strange disturbance, which it turns out is actually Vlad the Impaler that they're hunting down.
Yeah.
So, and I want to make sure you guys get a good look at the artwork so you can kind of see the style. But that's what we're looking at there. Now, it's funny because Vlad the Impaler becomes essentially the antagonist of the book. She ends up escaping back into the coffin after having this adventure, and it actually looks like Mary Shelley ends up pushing Vlad into the coffin, so he disappears, and then Elvira follows suit. And it's cool because the end of the issue, Elvira pops up, and who does she run into but Edgar Allan freaking Poe. And so you can tell right off the bat that this is going to be a completely wild ride that is not going to make any sense, but is going to be totally fun.
But that's what I love about it. Like, I love it so much. After reading them, I actually watched Elvira, Mistress of the Dark from the 80s. It is so perfectly her, just so fucking random, and all the sexual innuendos. Fucking perfect. Like, again, as a person who doesn't read comic books, I could picture it going through as if it was a movie in my head, and it was great. It was so spot on with her mannerisms, everything, how she acts, everything she'd say. Like,
so many dick jokes.
So
and
good! Yes!
Like, I want to try and find one real quick because there's a lot of really funny humor. They even make a joke here where she attacks Vlad, and she goes after him with her knife, and it springs back out, and she's like, damn it, one of these days I gotta replace this thing with a real knife.
Yeah.
And I love that when she uses that in the movie.
Yes, I was just gonna say, she does that in the movie too. Like, it's a joke.
But I'm trying to see, I don't know. Oh, you know what? I think I did actually write down a couple of examples of her jokes. So just so you guys, I'm going to make sure you guys see all the covers individually. So this is a good look at cover number 1, which is particularly funny because if you, our screen disappeared. But if you look at the skull on her lap, the skull is distracted. He's not looking at camera. He's looking at something else entirely. So that's issue number 1. Moving into issue number 2, of course, she appears in the time with Edgar Allan Poe, and I'll give you a good look at issue number 2.
And that's what I love too, how they all like continued.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Well, generally that's what comic series do now. Yes, I know because you don't know. A lot of people that aren't into comics might think that it's different issue to issue. This was a 4-issue series.
Yeah.
Well, it's a 4-issue story arc, is what they call it, where all 4 issues make one story, and in fact, it didn't seem like it ended, right?
Right.
But so there's more, but that's going to be the next 4-issue arc.
I can't.
That's how they do it. So, so she appears with Edgar Allan Poe. And she's like, Edgar Allan freaking Poe, and he's like, why do you repeat my name? And she says, some people might have missed the last issue, so I thought it might be nice to bring them up to speed, And she's just straight up talking to him right here. And again, she breaks the fourth wall all the time. She even says, I traveled through time, met Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley, and a couple of losers she was hanging around with, and fought off a big scary creep with a porn stash. There were a ton of variant covers too. You'd have loved it. And then she turns to camera, looks right at the audience right here, and is like, you guys get all that? I'm not doing it again. I'm here for sex appeal and jokes, not exposition.
I love her so much.
Well, that's, again, this all is to the writing
It
of
is
the
to the
book.
right, yes.
Avalon
to the
really
writing,
nailed
yes.
Elvira. Like,
Yes,
really.
I appreciate it.
And he's
so
the one
much.
behind the new shape of Elvira, which I've got the first issue of now as well. So we have a lot to look forward to. But I mean, here we are. We start off in a cemetery. Edgar Allan Poe found her in the coffin because, of course, he does his musings in cemeteries.
Mm-hmm.
Where else would Edgar try and think of stuff? And then, of course, Vlad comes through and shows up and starts to chase them.
You have no idea how excited I was when I saw that Vlad the Impaler was in Elvira, because I fucking love Vlad the Impaler with his fucking killer sword and all that shit. Oh my god!
Well, and it's funny too because they talk about how he was known for being the Impaler, and he's like, "Oh, I stopped doing that centuries ago," and stuff like that.
It's so.
He's like so humble about it and stuff like
it's
that.
so good.
But yeah, so they end up having this sort of back and forth. He, of course, sees that Elvira is there in this new time, so he somehow thinks that Elvira is the one behind it.
Right.
And so he becomes obsessed with figuring out what's going on, and so she has to get away. I'm purposely not showing you a bunch of stuff, but there was one funny thing that I wanted to show you involving a whip that I thought was really funny that I put in our personal chat. That I really enjoyed, where so Vlad is transformed into this giant bird, and Elvira grabs the whip and goes up and just goes on top of the carriage that they're riding and whips a lamp with fire nearby, and then whips Vlad in his bird form. It's really badass, and I'm like, whoa, Elvira's a badass. And then she even says right here, hang on, let me get it real close. Indiana Jones got nothing on me. I mean, he's good, but I bet he never worked in a dungeon, if you know what I mean. As she literally winks at the audience. I love that stuff. It was so fun. And then, she goes back into the coffin one more time, and she's like, who am I going to meet this time? And she comes out, and it's Bram Stoker and his wife.
Yes.
So that's where we're going for issue number 3, which, obviously we're enjoying the story, so I don't want to ruin everything. I'm not going to go as in depth,
you guys
but I do want to at
to
least show you this.
Yes.
This particular cover was a good one. So, Plague of Frogs, obviously. So Elvira wakes up in the Stokers. There's a bunch of, funny jokes.
Picture,
and
is that the one you posted?
yeah, that's the one I posted. Yeah, exactly. And then it's funny too because Stoker's wife is immediately jealous because she knows Stoker. And she's like, how do you know this woman? And stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's pretty funny. Vlad, of course, comes out again, and then they have to fight him off and whatnot. I'm trying not to spoil anything, but they actually do get into it. There's a bit of a fight, and there's actually a really funny outcome to this moment where Elvira finally gets the drop on him, where it turns out that everything she learned in movies might not actually be true. So that was a funny little reveal.
Right.
He's like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
But yeah, so she ends up escaping and goes through the portal one more time and ends up emerging on the set of The Bride of Frankenstein. Or it's not actually The Bride of Frankenstein because of rights issues that they ran into, which was a funny joke too.
Yeah, but...
But here we are at the 4th issue, and beautiful Elvira with a nice skull chalice and skulls and everything floating up to the air.
And titties.
Of course, there's that. But it's beautiful artwork for the covers.
It really is.
It looks like I got the same cover artist for all of them, but I do know there were a bunch of them. But yeah, so this picks up in the I want to, and let's see, okay, because I want to make sure that I'm not violating the copyright either.
He
not
likes
that
to
I
violate
would.
everything.
But it's supposed to be the Bride of Frankenstein and Frankenstein, but they tiptoe around it so it's not actually them. And she's like, oh, rights issues, huh?
Yeah.
Like she calls them on it. But yeah, so the rest of it is Vlad shows up and there's a sort of final showdown, which actually involves
everything.
It actually involves this guy right here. It's actually they emerge on a John Wayne movie set. Did you know that that was supposed to be John Wayne?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool. Just making sure.
Okay.
I'm sure you did. Yeah.
Apparently, I'm. Related.
You're a classic movie fan, so it doesn't surprise me.
Sorry.
And then it actually ends on a pirate ship during the filming of another really popular movie. So it's all really good stuff. Although this part right here, I was a little really. That's like,
oh, it's Elvira.
I know, yeah, it's true.
No, it's
That's
so
true.
great
That's
like
true.
that.
And
like,
I don't want to show it, but it was a funny end.
Read it.
And
look at it.
And it turns out that we're left on a bit of a cliffhanger for the next 4-issue arc, where I'll just show you here to give you a bit of an example of where it's gonna go. So yeah, Elvira and what looks like a very demonic guy surrounded by fire. You can guess where they might be going. So taking Elvira to that place is gonna be fun. So that'll be the next arc of Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. It's not going to be continued in this, which is what I was referring to earlier, which is the next. It's actually a different series, The Shape of Elvira, not Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. This is the first issue, written by the same guy.
I haven't even had a chance.
I haven't read it either. It just came out this week. So we will be doing this, but this will be continued separately in Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. Mm-hmm. So we actually have 2 Elvira comics going right now.
I am totally okay with this.
Yeah, if it's written by David Avalon,
okay.
I'm okay with it too, to be honest with you.
Elvira.
He's proven to be a very worthwhile Elvira writer. So.
Yes.
So yeah, guys, that's going to do it for our review of the first 4 issues of Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. Why don't you guys let us know in the comments down below if you are interested to pick this up. I imagine the first trade will probably be out either later this month. Later this month if it's not available already.
In which you are going to be interested. So leave us a comment below telling us how much you loved it, because you're going to want to read it because it's fucking Elvira.
If you go get it and you read it, come back and tell us what you thought. But if you haven't, let us know if this influences you to go do so.
Which
we would greatly appreciate it.
Because it's Elvira, so why not?
Indeed. So
Titties.
It's very worth your time, very worth your money. It is a lot of laughs and 4 compact issues. So check them out when you get a chance. If you guys want to support the channel, please do so. There's a link in the description box down below for our Patreon if you want to support it monetarily. You can select movies for us to review, do commentaries for, things like that. But if you don't want to support us monetarily but still want to support us, you can just like this video or subscribe to the channel. We greatly appreciate it if you do. We have more horror comics coming. I'm going to be reviewing Doll Man Kills the Full Moon Universe with Fuego.
I will be on
that'll be
Elvira.
coming up soon. Yeah, and Susie will continue the Elvira ones with me, I'm assuming. So thank you guys very much for watching. Until next time, I've been Cecil Laird.
I'm Susie Von Slaughter.
And remember, stay scared.